Forced to marry for land, he said, "This is duty." The Apache girl answered, "No love." But in the end, Mateo woke up before the sun touched the horizon. The soft light of dawn barely reached the edges of his small cabin, but he could already hear the sounds of the village stirring. Chickens clucked, dogs barked, and the wind carried the faint scent of smoke from the cooking fires. He stretched his stiff muscles and looked out toward the fields. His father's land was vast, filled with fertile soil, grazing areas for horses, and a small patch of wildflowers near the stream. It was their family's pride, but also the reason for the heavy burden Mateo carried. His father, Tano, was already outside, pacing near the fence, his hands folded behind his back. Mateo knew exactly why. The elders of the village had come to an agreement weeks ago. To secure their family's land and maintain peace with the neighboring families, Mateo was to marry Nayeli, the daughter of another respected family. It was a marriage arranged for duty, not for love. Tano had explained it many times, his voice steady but firm. "This is what we must do, Mateo," his father said. "Our family's future depends on it. Your duty comes first. Love will follow later, maybe. But the land, the people, the family, these must come first." Mateo nodded silently, but inside, a knot of unease twisted in his chest. He respected his father, and he understood the weight of duty. He had seen the struggles of other families who had lost their land or faced conflict when agreements were broken. Yet the thought of marrying someone he did not love made his heart heavy. He had never spoken to Nayeli beyond brief greetings at village gatherings, and though he knew she was strong and proud, he wondered if she would accept him at all. Across the village, Nayeli stirred in her home. She had heard the news long before the families came to formalize the agreement. Nayeli was not a girl who accepted life passively. She had grown up learning the ways of her people, strong in mind and body. She could ride, hunt, and speak with elders with confidence, and she had always believed that marriage should be a choice made with the heart. The idea that her hand in marriage had been decided by others filled her with anger and fear. When she heard that Mateo had agreed to the arrangement without hesitation, her frustration deepened. "How can he accept this without even asking me?" she muttered to herself. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "He is a good boy," her mother said softly. "He is honorable. But you must speak for yourself, tell in your heart. Make him understand." The day of the meeting arrived. The sun shone brightly, the sky a clear blue, and a soft breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Families from both sides gathered at the central gathering place, a flat area surrounded by trees. Elders and neighbors stood around, their eyes watching every move. Mateo and Nayeli approached each other, keeping a careful distance. The tension in the air was almost visible. Mateo's father spoke first, his voice strong. "Today we unite our families. This marriage will protect our land, honor our families, and ensure peace." Mateo, Nayeli, stepped forward. Nayeli's eyes met Mateo's, and she saw the quiet determination in his gaze. He seemed calm, almost accepting, but she could sense the weight on his shoulders. She straightened her back and raised her chin.
"I do not agree," she said clearly.
Her voice rang with confidence. "I will not marry without love. I cannot give my heart to someone I do not choose." A hush fell over the crowd. The elders exchanged glances, some nodding with understanding, others frowning in disapproval. Mateo felt a pang of surprise but did not falter. He had been expecting resistance, and he understood her feelings. Still, he knew his duty. "I understand," he said quietly, "but my family's duty comes first. I cannot refuse. I hope in time respect and understanding can grow between us. That is all I can offer now." Nayeli's eyes narrowed. She studied him, trying to read the honesty in his words. There was no arrogance, no false pride, only a sense of responsibility. That recognition did not erase her anger, but it made her pause. She had met many young men who were boastful or careless. Mateo was neither. The elders spoke next, guiding them through the formalities. Rituals were performed to symbolize the joining of the families. Offerings were made, words of blessing were shared, and neighbors nodded in quiet agreement. Nayeli followed the motions with dignity, though her heart was heavy. Mateo, too, followed the customs, keeping a careful balance between obedience and respect. As the ceremony ended, the crowd began to disperse. Nayeli walked a few steps ahead, her head held high, refusing to show any emotion. Mateo followed slowly, giving her space. The path back to their respective homes was quiet. The weight of what had happened settled between them, unspoken yet palpable. Over the next days, Mateo prepared to move into Nayeli's family home, as was the tradition. He helped with chores, mended fences, and ensured the livestock were cared for. Nayeli observed him silently. She did not offer words of friendship or welcome, but she noticed small acts of diligence and respect. He did not try to dominate or impress her. He simply performed his duties with care. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Nayeli approached Matteo. "I do not hate you," she said softly, "but do not expect love from me. I will not pretend." Matteo nodded. "I do not expect it now," he replied. "I only ask for respect." That we can start with. It was not love, but it was a beginning. A fragile thread of understanding, a recognition of each other's integrity, had been formed. Both knew the path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges of heart and duty. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of connection, even if it was cautious and uncertain. Days turned into weeks. Matteo and Nayeli navigated their new life, sharing responsibilities and living under the same roof. They ate together, worked together, and sometimes shared quiet moments near the fire. Their words were few, but actions spoke volumes. Matteo showed care without intrusion, and Nayeli observed without judgment. The community noticed the subtle change. Whispers of approval began to replace earlier doubts. Matteo's father watched with quiet pride. He had known this would not be easy, but he also understood that respect and patience were stronger than force. Nayeli's mother offered guidance, reminding her daughter that hearts could change over time when given space and honesty. As the first part of their story unfolded, Matteo and Nayeli remained cautious. The promise of duty had brought them together, but the possibility of respect, understanding, and perhaps one day love hung quietly in the air. Both knew it would take time, trials and shared experience to move from duty to connection, from obligation to something deeper, and so life moved forward. The land was tended, the families watched, and the young couple navigated the delicate balance of expectation and personal desire. The story of duty had begun, and with it, the first steps toward a bond that neither had fully imagined, yet both would come to understand in the days and months ahead. The morning sun filtered softly through the thin curtains, casting warm lines across the floor of Nayeli's home. She stirred, awake, the quiet of the house broken only by the occasional crow of a rooster outside. Matteo was already up, moving through the rooms with careful steps. He had been assigned to help with the morning chores, and he carried himself with quiet purpose. Despite the circumstances, he took his responsibilities seriously, knowing that respect and duty were the only paths available to him. Nayeli watched from her doorway, arms crossed, the familiar tight knot of frustration settling in her stomach. She had never been one to accept life passively, and now she was faced with a reality she had not chosen. She was to live under the same roof as a man she did not love, performing rituals and routines dictated not by her heart but by her family's expectations. Yet she could not deny the small gestures of care Matteo displayed. He worked efficiently, speaking little, listening more. He did not attempt to dominate or control, and that, she realized, was rare among men she had known. Breakfast was a quiet affair. Nayeli prepared the meal with practiced hands, and Matteo set the table, careful to leave space for her to serve as she wished. They sat opposite each other, the silence filled with unspoken thoughts. Neither spoke of the marriage, and neither attempted to force the conversation. In this quiet coexistence, a fragile balance began to form. A balance of mutual respect, even if neither could yet call it understanding. The days passed slowly, each one blending into the next. Matteo tended the fields, repaired fences, and helped with the livestock, all tasks that required diligence and patience. Nayeli observed him as he worked, noting how he treated the animals with gentle hands and how he considered every step before acting. She did not approve of the marriage, but she could not ignore the care he took in fulfilling his duties. One afternoon, a neighbor came to the house with a request. A stray horse had wandered near the edge of the village, and it needed to be guided back to its proper place. Matteo took the responsibility without hesitation. Nayeli followed at a distance, curious despite herself. She watched as he approached the frightened animal, speaking softly in a tone that calmed it. He did not use force or anger. He relied on patience and understanding. Nayeli felt a flicker of respect, though she would not admit it aloud. Evenings were the most challenging. The house felt small, with two strong-willed people living under one roof, each wary of the other's intentions. They moved carefully around each other, performing their tasks without conflict, yet each glance carried unspoken judgment. Matteo never tried to overstep, and Nayeli never gave him reason to. They coexisted, a dance of distance and careful observation, each learning the other's patterns without speaking them aloud. One evening, as the sky turned golden with the setting sun, Nayeli decided to speak. She approached Matteo while he was repairing a broken fence post. "I do not want to misunderstand you," she said, her voice steady, "but I need to know, Do you agree to this only because of duty? Matteo paused, placing the hammer down and wiping his hands on a cloth. He looked at her, his expression calm. Yes, he said simply. This is my duty. I cannot refuse my family, and I cannot turn my back on what is expected of me, but I will do what I can to honor you and your wishes, even if my heart does not yet know love. Nayeli considered his words carefully. They were honest, without pretense or deception. She could not claim to feel warmth toward him, but she recognized the truth in his eyes. In a way, this honesty was rare, and it made her slightly less resistant. She did not speak further, only nodded, and returned to her own chores. As the weeks went by, their interactions began to change subtly. Matteo's gestures of respect became more noticeable. He ensured she had water while working in the garden, offered assistance when heavy baskets needed lifting, and never interrupted when she spoke with elders. Nayeli, in turn, began to observe him more closely, noting the consistency in his actions, the patience he showed, and the quiet strength that did not demand attention but earned it naturally. One day, a sudden storm swept across the village. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and strong winds rattled the wooden structures. Matteo and Nayeli worked together to secure the animals and protect the crops. The storm was intense, but they moved as a team, each responding to the other's actions without needing to speak. By the time the rain had passed, the damage was minimal, and their cooperation had been seamless. For the first time, Nayeli felt a spark of admiration for Matteo. He had not asked for praise, nor had he shown frustration. He simply did what needed to be done. That night, the village gathered near the communal fire to share stories and check on one another. Matteo and Nayeli sat nearby, still cautious but aware of the bond forming between them. Nayeli's mother leaned closer and whispered, "See how he works with you? Not against you? That is rare. Perhaps in time, your hearts will find understanding." Nayeli did not respond immediately, but she felt a small, warming thought settle in her mind. Perhaps, she considered, respect could grow into something more if given the chance. Life continued with its routine. Matteo and Nayeli found themselves sharing small conversations over meals, discussing the work of the land, the needs of their families, and occasional stories of their childhoods. These exchanges were brief but meaningful, allowing them to glimpse each other's personalities beyond the surface. Matteo learned of Nayeli's determination, her intelligence, and her sense of fairness. Nayeli learned of Matteo's loyalty, his patience, and the quiet way he carried responsibility. Each discovery chipped away at the initial walls they had built around their hearts. Even as the days passed, challenges remained. Some neighbors still whispered about the marriage, questioning whether it could succeed without love. Matteo and Nayeli felt the weight of these judgments but refused to show irritation. Instead, they focused on the work at hand, the care of the land, and the respect they were learning to offer each other. Every shared task, every small act of consideration became a step toward understanding, even if neither was ready to admit it openly. One afternoon, Nayeli found herself teaching Matteo how to identify certain herbs used for cooking and healing. He listened carefully, asked questions politely, and followed her instructions precisely. She noticed the eagerness to learn, the attentiveness in his eyes, and she felt a subtle shift in her feelings. This was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of a bond formed through shared knowledge and mutual respect. Evenings often brought moments of quiet reflection. Matteo would sit near the fire, sharpening tools or preparing for the next day's work, while Nayeli sat nearby, embroidering or tending to household tasks. They did not always speak, but there was comfort in the shared presence. The tension that had defined the early days of their marriage began to soften, replaced by a sense of partnership built on observation, patience, and effort. Despite the growing understanding, Nayeli remained firm in her stance regarding love. She admired Matteo's character and respected his dedication, but she would not allow herself to be swept away by feelings she had not chosen freely. Matteo accepted this with grace, never pressing her, never trying to force affection. He knew that time, actions, and consistency were the only paths to trust and, eventually, perhaps love. Weeks turned into months. The seasons shifted, bringing cooler winds and the first hints of autumn. Matteo and Nayeli continued their daily routines, each learning more about the other with every passing day. The chores remained demanding, the responsibilities heavy, but the shared experience began to form a foundation of understanding. Respect, once a fragile thread, was slowly becoming a sturdy rope connecting them in ways they had not expected. The villagers began to notice subtle changes. They saw Nayeli speaking with Matteo without sharpness in her tone, and Matteo responding without formality or distance. The shared tasks during storms, harvests, and daily work had created moments of quiet cooperation that spoke louder than words. The marriage, once viewed as a reluctant arrangement, began to take on the shape of a partnership, grounded in duty but hinting at the possibility of something more. By the end of Part 2, Matteo and Nayeli had not yet discovered love, nor had they spoken of it, but the seeds of connection had been planted. Through shared responsibility, respect for boundaries, and careful attention to one another's needs, they were learning the ways of partnership. The foundation had been laid, strong and steady, upon which trust, understanding, and eventually love could grow. They knew the journey ahead would be filled with trials, but they also recognized that cooperation, patience, and mutual respect had already begun to change their hearts in quiet, subtle ways. The story of duty had evolved into a story of careful partnership. Matteo and Nayeli, once strangers bound by obligation, were slowly learning the rhythms of living together, the power of actions over words, and the possibility that love could emerge from respect and shared experience. And though neither could yet admit it, the path from duty to heart had begun, winding gently through the days, shaping a connection that promised to grow in time. The morning air was crisp as Matteo stepped out into the yard. Mist hung over the fields like a soft veil, and the first light of dawn touched the tips of the grass with pale gold. He inhaled deeply, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, and glanced toward the house. Nayeli was already outside, carefully tending to a small patch of herbs near the edge of the garden. Her movements were precise and deliberate, and her face was calm, yet focused. Matteo paused for a moment, watching her work. There was something steady in the way she moved, a quiet strength that he had come to admire silently. He approached her slowly, careful not to disturb the rhythm of her mourning. "The rain last night left the soil soft," he said gently. "It should be easier to plant today." Nayeli glanced up, her dark eyes meeting his. She did not smile, but she nodded, acknowledging his observation. "Yes," she said simply, "but we must work carefully. The roots are delicate." The two worked side by side, each tending to their tasks while sharing the occasional comment about the land. Matteo watched how her hands moved over the plants, how she assessed each one with thought and care. He had always respected hard work, but there was something about the dedication in Nayeli's actions that inspired deeper respect. For the first time, he felt that their partnership could be more than mere duty. Days passed with the quiet rhythm of work and small interactions. They shared meals, discussing plans for the crops, the care of animals, and the needs of the families. Matteo listened when Nayeli spoke, not out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. She noticed this attentiveness, and though she did not admit it aloud, it softened her judgment of him. It was rare to find someone who listened without interruption, who considered another's words before speaking. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of the fence near the orchard, a small accident occurred. A loose plank shifted beneath Matteo's weight, sending him stumbling slightly. Nayeli reacted instantly, catching his arm before he could fall. "Are you all right?" she asked, concern flickering in her voice. Matteo steadied himself, grateful for her quick reflexes. "I am fine," he said, his voice calm. "Thank you." They exchanged a glance, and for a brief moment the tension that had always existed between them softened. There was no spoken apology, no declaration of feeling, only a shared acknowledgement of care. It was a small incident, but it marked a turning point. Each began to see the other as more than a duty to fulfill, more than an obligation to endure. There was humanity in their partnership, and with it came a subtle warmth neither had expected. Evenings continued to be a time of quiet observation. After the day's work, they often sat near the fire, attending to small household tasks or mending clothes. Matteo's hands were steady as he stitched, and Nayeli observed him with curiosity. He worked with patience, taking care not to rush or make mistakes. She had seen many men attempt such tasks, but most lacked precision or care. Matteo's diligence spoke of a deeper character, one that was thoughtful and reliable. Nayeli found herself speaking more often, sharing stories of her childhood, tales of the village, and memories of lessons learned from her elders. Matteo listened attentively, asking questions that showed he valued her experiences. He did not interrupt, he did not judge, he simply acknowledged her words with a respectful nod or a gentle question. Nayeli began to realize that trust, a key to connection, was slowly growing between them. One day, a wandering traveler came to the village, seeking directions and assistance. The traveler had lost his way and was tired from the long journey. Matteo and Nayeli met him at the edge of the village, guiding him to a safe resting place and offering food and water. They worked together seamlessly, their actions coordinated without the need for discussion. Nayeli noticed how Matteo treated the traveler with patience and kindness, without arrogance or condescension. It was a subtle but powerful demonstration of his character. As they escorted the traveler back to the main path, Nayeli spoke quietly. "You have a way of making others feel safe," she said. "It is unusual." Mateo looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "I believe everyone deserves care," he replied. "We do not know the burdens others carry." The words lingered in Nayeli's mind long after the traveler had departed. Mateo's actions, paired with his words, revealed a depth of character she had not anticipated. She could not yet call it affection, but it was admiration, a quiet recognition of his strength and integrity. Their days continued, filled with chores, communal work, and shared responsibilities. Mateo and Nayeli found small moments to talk, to exchange observations about the land, and to share fleeting laughter when a task went awry. These moments, though brief, were precious. They began to break down the walls of resistance that Nayeli had built around her heart. She remained cautious, but she could no longer deny the subtle bond forming between them. One evening, while gathering firewood near the edge of the forest, Nayeli paused to catch her breath. Mateo waited patiently, allowing her space without comment. She looked at him, noticing the steady determination in his posture, the way his hands moved with confidence and care. "You are consistent," she said softly. "It is not something I have seen often." Mateo nodded. "I try to be reliable," he replied. "I know that actions mean more than words." The simplicity of the exchange carried weight. They did not speak of love, nor did they need to. Their connection was forming in the small, consistent ways, through shared work, attentive listening, and mutual respect. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it was growing steadily, like a seed pushing through soil toward the sunlight. Weeks turned into months. Mateo and Nayeli continued to navigate their life together, each learning the other's rhythms and patterns. They faced small disagreements, as any two people living closely would, but they approached these moments with patience and understanding. Mateo never sought to control, and Nayeli never sought to belittle. They had learned the language of compromise, the unspoken rules of living together with respect and care. During one particularly challenging week, heavy rains threatened the crops and flooded the lower fields. Mateo and Nayeli rose before dawn, working side by side to reinforce the levees, protect the animals, and salvage the harvest. Their actions were coordinated naturally. Each anticipated the other's movements and responded without hesitation. By the end of the day, drenched and exhausted, they paused to rest. Nayeli looked at Mateo, noticing the determination in his eyes and the sweat on his brow. "You never stop," she said, a hint of awe in her voice. Mateo shook his head slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. "We cannot allow the work to wait," he said simply. "We must care for the land and the people who depend on it." Nayeli felt a stirring in her heart, a mixture of respect and something softer, something she could not yet name. She realized that the man she had once seen only as duty and obligation was becoming someone worthy of admiration and perhaps, eventually, affection. Evenings became times of reflection. Mateo and Nayeli would sit quietly by the fire, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply observing the glow of the flames. They shared thoughts about the future, about the land, and about their families. Each conversation, each shared silence, was a building block in the growing bond between them. Trust, once fragile, had taken root. Respect, once distant, had become familiar. One night, as the stars glittered across the sky, Nayeli found herself speaking softly. "I do not know if I will ever feel love," she admitted, "but I see your heart, Mateo. I see your effort, your patience, and your care, and for that, I am grateful." Mateo looked at her, his eyes steady and calm. "That is all I could hope for," he said. "Gratitude and understanding. Love, if it comes, will arrive in its own time." The night was quiet after their conversation. Both felt a sense of peace, a rare comfort in a life that had begun with tension and obligation. The small sparks of connection, the subtle recognition of each other's worth, had transformed their daily routines into something meaningful. It was not love yet, but it was something stronger than indifference. It was respect, partnership, and the promise of trust. As Part 3 came to a close, Mateo and Nayeli were no longer strangers bound only by duty. They had begun to see each other as companions, partners in work, and witnesses to each other's strength. The bond, though still fragile, had taken shape in small gestures, shared experiences, and the quiet understanding that comes from observing and valuing another person. Love had not yet arrived, but the foundation had been laid. Respect, admiration, and trust were growing steadily, like a river carving a path through the land, gentle yet persistent. The journey from duty to heart continued, moving slowly but surely. Matteo and Nayeli knew challenges still lay ahead, but they also knew that the small sparks of connection, the subtle respect, and the shared experiences were shaping something enduring. The story of their marriage, once born of obligation, was now evolving into a tale of partnership, patience, and the quiet beginnings of emotional bond, a bond that promised to deepen in the days and months to come. The first frost of the season touched the village, painting the edges of the leaves with delicate white. The air had a sharp, cool bite, and the early mornings brought mist that clung to the fields. Matteo was already awake before dawn, tending to the animals and checking fences. The long hours of labor were necessary to protect the crops and livestock from the changing weather. Nayeli emerged soon after, wrapped in a thick shawl, carrying baskets of herbs and firewood. The two moved through the yard in silent coordination, each aware of the other's presence without needing to speak. It was during times like these that the strength of their partnership became evident. Matteo had learned to anticipate Nayeli's movements and needs, and she in turn trusted him to handle the responsibilities he had accepted so willingly. They worked together seamlessly, mending fences, tending animals, and securing the land against the harshness of the approaching winter. The cooperation was quiet, understated, but it spoke volumes of the growing trust between them. One morning, news arrived that a nearby herd of cattle had strayed into another family's territory, causing tension among the villagers. Matteo and Nayeli were asked to help resolve the situation, guiding the animals back while maintaining peace with their neighbors. It was a delicate task, requiring patience, calm, and clear communication. Matteo took the lead, quietly instructing Nayeli on the best paths to herd the cattle, while she responded with precision, her sharp eyes and quick reflexes ensuring none of the animals wandered astray. The work was grueling, but they persevered together. At one point, a frightened calf broke away, darting toward the edge of a steep embankment. Without hesitation, Nayeli ran after it, Matteo close behind, guiding the animal to safety. Their actions were synchronized, instinctive, a dance of mutual understanding honed through months of shared experience. By the end of the day, the herd was safely returned, and the villagers offered words of praise and gratitude. Matteo and Nayeli exchanged a glance, tired but satisfied, acknowledging their joint effort with a small nod rather than words. As winter deepened, another challenge arose. A sickness had spread among some of the livestock, threatening the food supply for the village. Matteo and Nayeli worked tirelessly, tending to the animals, administering care, and ensuring that the healthier animals were protected. Their days became long and exhausting, yet they supported each other without complaint. Nayeli noticed how Matteo never lost patience, even when faced with setbacks or illness. His calm demeanor and steady hands provided reassurance not only to the animals but to her as well. One evening, after a particularly hard day, Nayeli sat by the fire, her hands red from the cold and the effort of work. Matteo placed a warm cup of herbal tea beside her without a word. She looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You always think of others first," she said softly. Matteo shrugged slightly, his eyes meeting hers with quiet honesty. "It is not difficult to care," he replied. "It is what must be done. It is our duty to those who depend on us." Nayeli took a sip of the tea, feeling the warmth spread through her body. She did not speak again, but inside she felt a subtle shift. Matteo's devotion to duty was not blind obedience. It was guided by care and consideration, qualities that she had come to respect deeply. As the days passed, the village faced further trials. A storm swept through one night, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. Trees fell, fences were damaged, and some areas of the fields flooded. Matteo and Nayeli rose before dawn, working side by side to repair the damage, secure the animals, and protect the crops. They moved with efficiency and understanding, anticipating each other's actions. In moments of physical strain, they offered small gestures of support, steadying one another, sharing tools, and offering words of encouragement. During the storm, a neighboring child became lost near the edge of the village. Nayeli noticed the child's absence and immediately called Matteo. Without hesitation, he followed her through the rain and mud, trusting her guidance as they searched. When they found the child, frightened and shivering, Nayeli wrapped a blanket around the small body while Matteo carried the child back to safety. Their teamwork in the face of danger was seamless, their concern for others evident in every action. After the storm passed, the villagers gathered to assess the damage and begin repairs. Matteo and Nayeli worked tirelessly, their hands raw and cold, but their spirits unbroken. Nayeli began to notice something she had not before, the strength that lay not only in his arms but in his character. Matteo did not seek recognition. He did not complain or boast. He simply acted with integrity, prioritizing the needs of others above his own comfort. One afternoon, while repairing a section of the roof damaged by the storm, Nayeli slipped on a loose board. Matteo was instantly there, steadying her and preventing a fall. "Careful," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Do not risk yourself needlessly." Nayeli looked at him, her chest tightening with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper she did not yet name. She had always been independent, proud, and cautious, yet in that moment she realized she could trust him, rely on him, and feel safe in his presence. It was not love, not yet, but it was a connection rooted in respect, trust, and shared hardship. The experience of working together through crises, tending to the land, caring for animals, and protecting the village gradually brought them closer. They began to anticipate each other's needs without speaking, understanding that their bond was strengthened by mutual effort. Nayeli, who had once resisted the marriage with every fiber of her being, found herself admiring Matteo's quiet strength and steadfast nature. Matteo, in turn, saw the courage, intelligence, and resilience in Nayeli that complemented his own sense of responsibility. One cold evening, as the wind howled outside, they sat together by the fire, tending to the warmth and repairing tools for the next day's work. Nayeli broke the silence, her voice soft but sincere. "I see how you care for this land, for the people, and even for me," she said. "I do not know what the future holds, but I am beginning to understand the heart behind your duty." Matteo looked at her, his eyes steady and calm. "I only do what must be done," he replied, "but knowing that my efforts are recognized gives them meaning." The conversation was brief, yet it marked a turning point. Nayeli's acknowledgement was not an admission of love, but it was a recognition of value and intention. Matteo's words reinforced the sincerity behind his actions, and in that understanding, a deeper connection began to form. In the weeks that followed, the partnership between Matteo and Nayeli strengthened further. They continued to face challenges, crop failures, livestock illness, and harsh weather, but each trial was met together. Their coordination and reliance on each other became natural, their bond forged in shared effort and mutual respect. The villagers began to notice the subtle transformation. Where once there had been tension and resistance, there was now a quiet partnership, admired and respected by all who observed it. One day, while working in the fields, Nayeli paused to rest, watching Matteo adjust a fence post with careful precision. "You never tire of doing what is right," she said, her voice carrying a note of admiration. Matteo looked up, meeting her gaze. "I do what must be done," he replied. "And I do it knowing you are here beside me, helping in your own way." Nayeli felt warmth in her chest, a feeling that was slowly growing, subtle and unspoken. She did not yet call it love, but she recognized the strength of their bond, a bond that had emerged not from choice alone, but from shared trials, trust, and understanding. As winter approached its peak, Matteo and Nayeli faced one final challenge together. A section of the riverbank, weakened by the storm, threatened to flood the lower fields. The task of reinforcing it was dangerous and required careful planning and execution. Matteo and Nayeli worked side by side, their movements synchronized, each anticipating the other's actions. They lifted heavy stones, tied supports, and reinforced the bank, their hands raw and their bodies tired. Yet they persisted, knowing that their combined effort would protect not only their land, but the livelihood of the entire village. By the time the sun set, the riverbank was secure, the fields safe, and the villagers relieved. Matteo and Nayeli stood together, exhausted but satisfied. They exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of their shared effort and the bond it had strengthened. In the face of trials, they had learned to rely on each other, to trust one another's judgment, and to recognize the value of partnership. As Part 4 drew to a close, the relationship between Matteo and Nayeli had deepened in ways neither could have predicted. What began as a marriage of duty had evolved into a partnership grounded in trust, respect, and shared experience. The external challenges they faced, the storms, the illness, the accidents, had forced them to cooperate, to depend on each other, and to recognize the strength and value in one another. Though love had not yet arrived, the foundation was solid. The trials they endured together had created a bond that would carry them through the remaining challenges of life. The story, once rooted in obligation, was now blossoming into a tale of partnership, perseverance, and the quiet beginnings of deep emotional connection. Matteo and Nayeli were no longer merely fulfilling their duty. They were discovering the strength and potential of a bond forged through shared trials, one that promised to grow into something enduring and meaningful. The first signs of spring appeared on the horizon, soft green shoots pushing through the thawing earth. The air was crisp but carried a gentle warmth, and the village seemed to awaken from its long winter slumber. Mateo stood at the edge of the fields, surveying the land that he and Nayeli had worked so hard to protect through storms, frost, and countless long days. He breathed in the scent of damp earth, feeling a sense of pride and quiet contentment. The fields were safe, the crops planted, and the animals tended, but there was another part of life that had been slowly transforming, the bond between him and Nayeli. Nayeli approached, carrying a basket of fresh herbs and vegetables for the household. She paused when she saw Mateo, noticing the soft look in his eyes as he watched the horizon. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to step closer without hesitation. She did not speak immediately, but her presence beside him carried a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. "Good morning," Mateo said softly, turning to meet her gaze. "Good morning," Nayeli replied, her voice calm, yet carrying a warmth that had not been there before. They began their daily work together, tending the fields and the garden, but there was a subtle difference now. Their movements were no longer only coordinated by duty. There was ease in their actions, a shared understanding born of months of experience and mutual care. Mateo passed tools to Nayeli without a word, and she accepted them with a small nod, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It was a simple exchange, but it spoke of comfort, trust, and the beginnings of affection. As the day progressed, Mateo noticed Nayeli's focus on a particular section of the garden, where delicate flowers had begun to bloom. He approached her gently. "These look beautiful," he said, kneeling beside her to observe the blossoms. Nayeli looked at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "They are just flowers," she replied, though her voice lacked the usual sharpness. "Even small things deserve care," Mateo said. "And you have tended them well?" Nayeli felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was the first time she felt fully seen, not for her strength, not for her defiance, but for the effort, care, and heart she put into the simplest things. She did not reply, but she allowed him to remain beside her, their shoulders brushing slightly as they worked. The contact was brief, unspoken, yet it carried a new significance. The village was preparing for the annual spring festival, a time of celebration, storytelling, and community. Mateo and Nayeli were tasked with helping set up the decorations, arrange the tables, and organize activities for the children. The work required cooperation, patience, and creativity, and they approached it together, laughing quietly at small mishaps and sharing ideas. Nayeli found herself enjoying Mateo's company more than ever. His calm demeanor, gentle humor, and consistent respect made her feel safe and valued. During the festival, Mateo and Nayeli were asked to lead a dance with the children. Initially, Nayeli hesitated, her pride and caution holding her back, but Mateo offered his hand with a quiet smile, patient and unassuming. She took it, and together they guided the children, moving in rhythm, laughing when missteps occurred. In that moment, Nayeli realized that she had come to enjoy his presence, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She allowed herself to relax, to trust, and to feel something new stirring in her heart. As the festival continued into the evening, Mateo and Nayeli found a quiet moment away from the crowd. They stood by the edge of the river, watching the water glisten under the moonlight. The cool breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers and fresh earth. Nayeli turned to Mateo, her expression softening. "I have been thinking," she began, her voice steady but thoughtful. "All this time, I resisted the idea of this marriage. I told myself it was only duty, and I would never give my heart willingly. But now," she paused, searching for words. "I see that duty can lead to understanding, that effort, respect, and patience can create something real." Mateo listened quietly, his eyes fixed on hers, calm and steady. "I never expected love to come easily," he said. "I only hoped that respect and care could exist between us. If anything more grows, it must be natural, not forced." Nayeli smiled faintly, a smile that reached her eyes and softened her features. "It has grown," she admitted, slowly, quietly. "But it has grown. I see it now." Mateo's lips curved in a gentle smile. "Then we have found something together," he said. "Something stronger than duty. Something that can endure." The realization that they had come to this point where respect had blossomed into affection was profound. Nayeli felt a flutter in her chest, a warmth that was new and welcome. She looked at Mateo, truly looked at him, and saw the quiet strength, the integrity, and the unwavering care that had drawn her to him over time. She understood that love did not always arrive as a sudden spark. Sometimes it grew slowly, nurtured by shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect. The following days were filled with small but meaningful moments. Matteo and Nayeli worked together in the fields, prepared meals for their families, and cared for the animals. They spoke freely now, sharing thoughts, dreams, and quiet laughter. Their partnership was no longer defined solely by duty. It was defined by choice, understanding, and a growing emotional connection. Nayeli found herself seeking Matteo's counsel, valuing his opinions, and taking comfort in his steady presence. Matteo, in turn, found joy in her insights, her laughter, and the moments of softness she allowed him to witness. One morning, as they prepared the garden for the new planting season, Nayeli turned to Matteo with a mischievous smile. "Do you remember when I said I would never love you?" she asked. Matteo chuckled, shaking his head. "I remember, and I respected it." "Things change," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "I did not expect it, but I feel differently now." "I see your heart, Matteo, and I cannot deny it." Matteo reached for her hand, holding it gently. "And I see yours," he said. "Patience, courage, and kindness. I have admired you from the beginning, even when you would not allow it. Now I feel that admiration has deepened into something more." Nayeli's smile widened, warmth spreading through her chest. "Then we have found love," she said, her voice steady and confident. "Not the kind I imagined in my youth, but real. True, earned through time and shared trials." Matteo squeezed her hand, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. The land they had protected, the challenges they had faced, and the months of patience had created a bond that was unbreakable. They had grown together not through passion alone, but through respect, cooperation, and understanding. As spring fully arrived, the village thrived. The crops were healthy, the animals well cared for, and the families prospered. Matteo and Nayeli worked side by side, their partnership visible to all who knew them. Villagers who had once doubted the union now spoke with admiration, noting the quiet strength of their bond and the genuine care they showed one another. In the evenings, Matteo and Nayeli would sit together, sharing stories, planning for the future, or simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. They had learned that love was not always immediate or dramatic. Sometimes it was the quiet, steady growth of two hearts learning to understand, trust, and respect each other fully. One afternoon, as they prepared for a communal feast, Nayeli placed her hand on Matteo's shoulder, a gesture of warmth and connection. "I cannot imagine life without you now," she said softly. "You have become more than a partner in duty. You are my companion, my friend, my heart." Matteo's eyes shone with quiet joy. "And you have become mine," he replied. "What began as duty has become love. Slowly and surely, through every shared moment, every trial, and every act of care, we have earned this together." That evening, under the soft glow of lanterns and the gentle sounds of the village celebrating, Matteo and Nayeli stood side by side. They watched their children play, their families laugh, and the land they had worked so hard to protect flourish. The trials of the past, the doubts, and the hardships all seemed distant now, replaced by a deep sense of fulfillment and peace. Their journey from obligation to love was complete, not as a sudden revelation, but as the natural result of time, effort, respect, and trust. Matteo and Nayeli had discovered that love could grow from duty, that bonds forged in shared challenges could blossom into something enduring and true. They had found in each other not just a spouse, but a companion, a confidant, and a partner for life. As the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Matteo and Nayeli walked hand in hand through the garden. Their steps were easy, their hearts light. They had learned that love was not always born in passion alone. It was nurtured, earned, and grown through shared experience, understanding, and unwavering respect. And in that knowledge, they found the deepest satisfaction of all. The story that began with duty, hesitation, and resistance had ended in partnership, affection, and a love both patient and enduring. Matteo and Nayeli had traveled a long path together, overcoming obstacles, learning from each other, and building a life that was strong, steady, and true. The land, the family, and the hearts they nurtured would all benefit from the love that had quietly, steadily grown between them.